Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to work on installing our clutch pack into our motor. We have a heavy-duty clutch kit that I purchased from BTD Motorsports that uses clutch discs that I believe are from a CR250. They've got the 10 fingers on them. Uses steel discs for a TRX250R with a thicker disc, I believe it's from a 400EX. We have a set of CR500 springs, washers, and bolts. I think you would commonly find this referred to as the Niels mod. I honestly don't know who came up with this modification, whether it's the Niels mod or whether it was something that was started by Honda. I've heard it both ways. But that's the clutch kit that we are going to be installing today. I also have the upgrade kit for our push rod with the bearing, washer, upgraded pressure plate. I believe this was the 88, 89, or 89 upgrade kit for the TRX250R. We're going to be installing that. So our first step, what we're going to do is we're going to open up all of our fiber plates and we're going to get some oil on them. Get them soaking in some oil so they can get good and wet. Then we're going to use some 400 grit sandpaper and we're going to scuff all of our steel discs. I have some 400 grit wet dry sandpaper that we're going to come over. It'll take down any burrs as well as just scuff the discs. That's one of the things they do recommend. Then we'll go ahead and get those installed into our clutch basket. Then we'll install our rod and bearing assembly and pressure plate and make sure that we have the proper free play and throw on that rod for proper engagement and disengagement of the clutch. There is a possibility that I may have to put an extra thrust washer in. I have one of those coming. It has not gotten here yet. So if I have to do that, I'll have to go back in and do that. But I'll show you what the free play should look like and where this arm for your clutch actuator lever should be when it is set up correctly. All right, have our clutch fibers. All of them are wet with oil. Very simply, I just used a paper plate, poured a little bit of oil in the middle of one disc while I was laying there, and then just roll it around on the plate, flip it over, get them good and wet, and then we'll just let them sit for a little while, let that soak in. They don't necessarily have to be submerged. Bottom line, you want to get just all the surfaces covered and allow that oil to start soaking in there for a little while. Okay, so while those are soaking and that oil is settling into there, we're going to open up our steel discs and then go ahead and run those over with the 400 grit sandpaper, get them scuffed up, and then I will wipe them down really good and actually run them through and coat them with a little oil as well. So for the steel discs, there's not a lot of prep for them, but they do say to scuff the surface. So I have some 400 wet dry sandpaper, put a little water on it, and then what I'll do is I'll just hold the disc down and just go over the top. You're basically just scuffing the surface. I did do one here already, and it's very smooth when they come from the factory, and it does just kind of breaks that smoothness up so you get a little more grab. Okay, once those are all scuffed up, just wipe them down, clean them real good. I will put a layer of oil on them as I assemble them. The thicker disc is going to get installed in the middle of the pack. And from what I've read, the slight increase in thickness and then the different springs with the washers is supposed to give you a better clamping force. You're supposed to have the clutch supposedly will last longer, better clutch lever feel, better grab, won't slip as much. and they say will handle up into the neighborhood of 70 or so horsepower without an issue. So we're going to start stacking this in. We're going to take our motor and we're going to tip it onto the side. That will make it much easier. And then we'll go ahead and start stacking our fibers in and our steel plates in. We've got 7 fibers, we've got 6 steel plates. You always start with a fiber and end with a fiber. So we're going to go ahead and start stacking them in. All right, nice thing about this stand is it'll allow me to not worry about any of the dripping oil that'll drip right into the oil case. Now, each of my fibers I see has one tab that has blue on it. So I'm going to orient those tabs all into the same place. I'm not sure if there's any particular rhyme or reason to them. I've not read anything on that. Same thing with your steels. You're going to find that there is kind of a rounded side and then a flat, sharper edge. Again, I've read different things. I'm putting a layer of oil on there right now, just running what's on my fingers across the metal. I've read that there's really no particular order they have to go in, but I'm going to position them with the rounded sides all facing out. So now we're going to put our first steel in. Again, now we're going to go to fiber. And again, I'm going to put the blue finger, I'm going to line them all up in the same position. And same thing, the next steel, I'll have the rounded edge facing out, putting a layer of oil on it. Now, to get to the middle of the pack, from what I've seen and most things that I've read, basically I'm going to put the thicker steel plate as my third steel plate. I've seen most people putting it as the third or fourth steel plate. Unfortunately, with the way it lays out, there really is no middle. So you're kind of one position or the other. So we're going to put the thicker one in now. Same thing, I'm putting the rounded side facing up. Now we're back into our steels, our thin steels. And then you continue to alternate fiber and steel all the way until you get all your discs and plates in. Almost done here. And we have all of our fibers and discs installed. Okay, so we have all of our fibers. You can see the blue fingers are all lined up. Our steel plates are all in. Okay, so we're going to install our pieces. We have all of our pieces for our upgrade kit. Just wanted to point out on the clutch actuator arm, you see there is a groove here, and that is what this rod is going to go into. So when you're installing the rod into the motor and you're dropping it down into here, you're going to have to kind of position and move the actuator until you feel it lock into place, and then you should be able to move the rod and feel it, or move the actuator lever and feel the rod move up and down. Okay, we have our clutch pack installed. Our clutch actuator lever is installed. And we have our rod in place. And as you can see, the rod doesn't fall all the way down in. So what we're going to end up having to do is to rotate this lever so that the arm is pretty much parallel with the case here. And you're going to have to push down on this and move it around until it lines up with the groove in, or the notch in the bottom of the lever arm, and falls into place. Okay, when it falls into place, you'll see it'll look kind of like that. And then the arm, let me try and get this in a position so you can see, should stay roughly parallel with the case there. Next, we're going to put our bearing support and bearing on top of the rod. You can see how that sits down on there. Next will be our thrust washer. Okay, so that's on there. So what you want is, when you move that actuator lever, you want your actuator rod to move smoothly and to return to its neutral position smoothly. If it doesn't, you're gonna have to adjust and check your rod. In my case here, the rod was actually in the alignment of the actuator lever. There must have been possibly some rubbing on the case, or just catching the edge of the case. And I actually had to grind the rod down slightly. Take about, well, let's see, the rod is a 7.5 millimeter diameter. Took it down to about 7.1 millimeters in the bottom, I'd say 2 to 3 inches. And that allowed the rod to clear whatever it was rubbing, and now it's moving smoothly. Next step is to put our pressure plate on. All right, so that's in place. Pressure plate rests firmly right down onto the fibers. I can still move the rod and have just a little bit of free play. And that you are going to want, once you put your springs and bolts in, you should always have just a very little bit of free play, so that you know that that rod is released. I can actually put my finger on the end of the rod and the bearing and spin it freely, so that you know that your pressure plate is clamping fully and there's no binding with that rod. I'm going to get ready to put our bolts in. All right, have all of our bolts and springs in place. Now you can run these by hand. You can put them in with an impact, but you need to be very careful. You don't want to snap these off. I'm running this is a 1/4 inch hex drive, and I'm running it on its lowest setting. And I'll take them down, and then I'll just give them one bump to snug them up. You want to make sure that the washers stay centered underneath the washers on the bolts, so that they seat in completely. And what'll happen is the spring tension obviously will be enough to keep them in place. If you're not comfortable using your impact, then just put them in by hand. Now again, I can put my finger right on the center bearing of the rod, and I can spin it very freely, not binding up at all. I can put my finger right on the top of the actuator rod and move the lever, and I can feel just a little bit of movement of that rod. Probably moves maybe a 1/16 of an inch, maybe even a little less than that. But that tells me that my pressure plate is bolted completely down. I've got the full clamping force on the discs, and there's no binding with that actuator rod and lever. So as that is released, your clutch is going to engage fully, and there's going to be no pressure on that rod. And that is it. So our clutch is fully installed. Next step for me is going to be cleaning up the surfaces here of our case and our case cover with a little bit of solvent just to make sure there's no oil on the surfaces, and then install the gasket and bolt the cover on for good. I'm going to go ahead and get that set up. All right, got our gasket in place. Now we're going to make sure that our water pump is lined up, and we're going to reinstall our cover. Okay, gonna get all of our bolts put in, and then we'll get ready to torque those up. All right, we got our clutch cover installed. We're gonna torque, whoops. We're gonna torque our mounting bolts down. All the mounting bolts have been coated with some anti-seize before installation. And then just torquing them in a kind of a crisscross pattern and getting them nice and secure. All right, we are good there. And our crankshaft still moves nice and smoothly, so everything spins good, including our water pump. Stand this up. Well, let me pull the camera back. And that is it. The bottom end of our motor is complete. Clutch is installed. All new gaskets, bearings, seals, clutch basket, clutch, stator, crankshaft. All we're ready for now is to put the top end on. That will be the next video, putting our piston and our jug and the cylinder head on. So that's it for this video. If you have any comments or suggestions, please feel free to leave them below. Thank you very much for watching. If you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much and have a great day.